Judge Stephen Bailey, retired, is the only Attorney General candidate with a background and expertise in criminal law. He was an elected Superior Court judge in El Dorado County for 8.5 years, where he had assignments in criminal, civil, probate, and juvenile cases, and served for 4 years as the presiding juvenile judge. Prior to the bench, he was in private practice, handling criminal and administrative law for 19 years, and was a certified criminal law specialist, certified by the California State Bar Board of Legal Specialization. He was also deputy director in charge of legalization for the California Department of Social Services under the late Governor George Deukmejian. Thank you. Right, yeah. I remember Arnold, guys. That was my governor I grew up with. I used to really brag about that. All right, Judge Bailey is calling on Californians of all political persuasions to unite in support of his campaign to bring fair and impartial approach to the Attorney General's office and refocus the state's top law enforcement position on reducing crime. California needs an Attorney General focused on solving our problems, not fighting in Washington, D.C. Judge Bailey has been endorsed by the California Republican Party, the NRA, Gun Owners of California, crime victims units, and even the L.A. Police Protective League, which represents nearly 10,000 officers of the LAPD. So it's an honor for me to introduce Judge Bailey.
I want to take a moment and introduce Tom Weismiller. Tom has been, since the very beginning, one of our key supporters here in not only in the Bay Area, but he's my statewide volunteer chairman, worked tirelessly through the primary and has been working hard to make this campaign succeed in the general election. And I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about that, but let me introduce myself a little bit more. I am a retired Superior Court judge out of El Dorado County. Those of you who know about El Dorado County, you go there on vacation, you leave on probation, and you return on violation. We are a relatively conservative county, although not entirely so. But we do have the reputation of having our county seat in Hangtown. So be good when you're up there. So as the kind introduction said, I spent 8.5 years as a Superior Court judge in El Dorado County. And those of you who know about Superior Court judges know that we either get elected or appointed by, if you're appointed by the governor, and then you have to run for election. Typically, you're there until you decide someday in the distant future that you want to retire. And, you know, I kind of envisioned that might be the way I was going to proceed. I'd been a trial attorney doing criminal law for some 18.5 years and get elected to the Superior Court bench in 2008, take office in January 2009, and you know, right there within 2 years comes Jerry Brown. Now those of you who are maybe a little older and remember Jerry Brown and the mess he made of California the first time around. You know, he appointed Rose Bird and a majority of the California Supreme Court, and you know, it took us a decade before the voters of California got so fed up with the policies of Jerry Brown that they threw 3 members of the California Supreme Court off at a retention election. You know, that hadn't happened in the history of California, and all of a sudden, Jerry Brown's appointees have been tossed off the court. Now, I say that story because let's fast forward it to 2010, when Jerry Brown is the adult in the room. I mean, we thought that California couldn't get worse, but when you start thinking that Jerry Brown is the conservative candidate and the only one who has any sense, that's how bad politics had become by the time 2010 came. And the voters of California elected him as governor. And I'm sitting on the bench, I'm doing criminal. I'm doing all the civil. I'm looking at what is happening in California. And within a very short period of time, Jerry Brown figured out that he had made some mistakes the first time around. So the second time around, he was going to not make the same mistakes. So he started off with deciding that he's going to empty the state prisons. But as governor, you don't get to just do that. So what he did to start with is he came up with prison realignment. And that's a nice, compact, safe-sounding word. We're going to realign prisons. So what did he actually do? He transferred inmates from the state prison down to your county jail. So in Santa Clara County, he filled up the county jail. So what did that mean? Well, it meant that the sheriff, who is in charge of the county jail, now had the problem of figuring out who was going to be released. So they started releasing what they were calling the low-level criminals. And, what do low-level criminals do? They go out and commit more low-level crimes that got them to the jail in the first place. But there's no room at the inn. The next thing he does is they change the sentencing structure in California. And as a judge, I am bound to sentence people based on a set of rules that are presented to us from the legislature. And those rules said that if you would have sent someone to state prison before, you can still sentence them to the same length of time, but they're going to go back to the county jail. In Los Angeles County, they have one individual that's been sentenced to 42 years in the Los Angeles County Jail. All over California, county jail sentences have been extended. And as those beds remain filled, what happens? More people who aren't necessarily low-level criminals are released. Back onto the streets. And where do they go? Go back into your neighborhood. They may not go into your neighborhood. Maybe they go to East Palo Alto. And then, because they've stolen everything and preyed upon everyone that they can in East Palo Alto, let's go up and find the good stuff. And so we started seeing an increase in our property crimes. And property crimes used to be felonies. Burglaries, thefts of more than $950 would be a felony. Multiple thefts would get you sentenced to state prison. So to fix that, Jerry Brown went back and you got the Safe Streets and Schools initiatives. That came on the ballot in 2014. Now, they promised you that schools would be safer, that your streets would be safer. How many feel like your schools or streets are safer today than they were before we passed that initiative? The effect was to decriminalize property crimes and to decriminalize drug crimes. What do you think drug dealers do to help satisfy that habit? They go out and steal. So we put it together, and suddenly we had tremendous spikes in crime throughout California. All you have to do is look at San Francisco. 26,000 auto break-ins last year. People don't want to drive a car into San Francisco for fear that they will not have a car coming out of San Francisco. Auto thefts started going up. Now, at the same time he's doing that, he still had a lot of people in the state prison. So the way to fix that is we'll just let them out. And so they passed an initiative called Prop 36, and they began the process of letting inmates out of the state prison. While at the same time, Jerry Brown is destroying the parole system in California, meaning they're not hiring parole officers. So we're letting 40,000 inmates back out onto your street without any supervision. And I, as a judge, am sitting there going, this is crazy. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. It doesn't even take a smart lawyer to figure out that if you do the policies that are being implemented by Sacramento, that you're going to have a spike in crime. And here we are in 2018, and even the Attorney General's website says that crime's gone up serious violent crime has gone up over 15% in the last 4 years. You know, serious violent crime are things like gun shootings, like robberies, like rapes, like murders. You know, we started seeing our first responders. I mean, the only thing they didn't give the first responders, our police and officers, was a target so they could put it on their back. Because they became the target of these people. The AB 109ers, you probably have heard those stories. Law enforcement officers who are being gunned down and assassinated on our streets throughout California. And it's no joke. And after, you know, as a judge, I and my colleagues would sit around in our chambers complaining about what's happening here in California. And pretty soon it was, as you heard one of your school board candidates say, somebody has to go out and do something about this. There's not very many somebodies in California. You know, it's not easy running for the school board, running for city council, running for attorney general is not easy. You know, the playing field may be a little bit bigger, but it's still very difficult. So in the August of 2017, about a little over a year ago, I finally made the decision that there wasn't going to be another somebody, that it was going to take an individual to go out and spend 24/7 going around California and talking about what California's problems were and how we could go change those issues. So I retired from the bench, I announced that I was going to run for Attorney General, and we started on the quest. Now, I am a lifelong Republican. You know, I go back before George Deukmejian and Jerry Brown and Ronald Reagan. You know, I'm old enough, you know, you're all younger than me. I'm old enough to remember California when it was called the Golden State. How many, by the way, have heard Jerry Brown, Javier Bracetta, any of the Democrats in Sacramento referred to California as the Golden State? Never. You know, that's the kind of state I want to live in. That's the kind of state I want to leave to my kids and my grandkids. I want them to be able to afford to live here. By the way, my grandkids and son-in-law and daughter, they moved to Colorado because they couldn't afford California. You know, those of you who have grandkids know the compelling draw that the grandkids have. You know, every grandparent wants to be down the street from the grandkids. I'd like to be able to do that. California is worth saving. You know, we can make a difference here in California. Now, as I was starting to say, you know, in California, we've set up a system to ensure that we get the minimum amount of democracy that you can have. And that's called the top two. Because the powerful interests in Sacramento, the politicians who run essentially the machines in California, and by the way, they're in both parties, really have a vested interest in making sure that they get to control who gets elected. So, the Democrats, you know, they ran their candidates for Attorney General in the June primary. There were two Republicans. A very fine gentleman out of Los Angeles, a practicing lawyer. I mean, like, he goes to court all the time, sort of knows, you know, what it is to be in a courtroom. I was a trial attorney before I went on the bench. You know, I've been in a courtroom most of my professional life. The two Democrats that ran, one was Jerry Brown's appointed Attorney General, because when Kamala Harris went back to the United States Senate, and we've seen what that's delivered for us, Jerry Brown appointed a obscure congressman from Los Angeles who for 26 years prior to his appointment had not had an active law license here in the state of California. Never tried a case. As best we can find, never was the attorney of record on any case for anything. Certainly not here in the state of California. The other Democrat that ran was the insurance commissioner, and he had been elected twice statewide. He also had a distinguished career working in the the Clinton administration. Came back to California, and you would think, he immediately went and opened up his law practice. No, he immediately ran for city council in Sacramento, then ran for the state assembly, then ran for insurance commissioner. Never went, as best I can tell, he'd be hard pressed to be able to tell you where the courthouse is in any county in California. So come June of 2018, I'm running against these other candidates. And as a Superior Court judge from El Dorado County, and by the way, it's not just El Dorado County, I was a judge in South Lake Tahoe. You can't get much more remote than being a judge from South Lake Tahoe. But in the process of running this campaign, we started talking about issues that were important to Californians, such as public safety, reducing crime, writing fair, objective ballot titles and summaries. Because that is, by the way, the sole responsibility of the Attorney General. The appellate courts have now made that crystal clear. So every time you go into your sample ballot and you read one of those ballot titles and summaries and you go, what did they just say? Am I voting yes because I want to vote yes, or no because I want to vote no? I can't figure this out. You know exactly who to blame that on. Because what they've done in Sacramento is they've taken the ballot titles and summaries and specifically made them as confusing and misleading as possible. Now, that's not coming from me. That's coming from two Sacramento County judges appointed by Gray Davis saying these ballot titles and summaries are misleading. And in fact, the second time that a judge did that, he said, I don't even trust you. He happens to be a Democrat. I knew the guy very well. In fact, I was on the Jenny Commission and recommended him to the governor to have him appointed. He said, I'm going to rewrite this ballot title and summary. Court of Appeals said, you can't do that. The Attorney General gets to write it. And as long as it's within some broad parameters and it's sort of maybe possibly could have some fact and truth to it, the Attorney General gets to write it any way they want. I think we can do better in California. We have an opportunity come November. By the way, I obviously became part of the top two in June, or I wouldn't be standing in front of you today. Now, I'm always very concerned about individuals' mental health. And the Democrat I beat by over 600,000 votes in the primary, the insurance commissioner, my guess is he's in rehab right now because he had been coronated to be in the top two. I mean, Democrats think that they own California, that you don't really count. Well, in June, you really counted. Because not only did we get, thank you, not only did I get nominated as part of the top two for November, but John Cox, who nobody thought could get into the top 2. He's now our candidate at the top of the ticket for governor. So, how do we do it in November? Well, you become that critical element once again. You know, there's a survey that was recently taken in the LA Times. The LA Times is no right-wing, crazy publication. The LA Times surveyed Democrats, wanted to find out what Democrats in this state were thinking. Obviously, Republicans don't count. So they asked the Democrats, is California going in the right direction? 45% of the Democrats of California said, no, we're not going in the right direction. You know, when you get 45% of the opposite party going, things are so bad even we think things are going in the wrong direction, that's really sending a message. It didn't actually get heard by the Democrats in Sacramento, however. You know, they continued along their path. You know, last year it was gas tax. Gas tax after they promised you, by the way, that you would get to vote on it. The governor said, well, shoot, if we give it to the voters, they're going to vote it down. So we can't have them have a voice on it. This session, they did some other really nifty things. The legislature decided that they were going to eliminate bail here in California. Yeah, bail referendum, sign it. And the reason that's so important is that, number one, you have a right in the California Constitution. You know, in Sacramento, they just think that these Constitution things are like a piece of paper to get in the way. Article 1, Section 12 gives you as a citizen a right to bail. You know, why is that important? Might not ever affect you. But what it does do is say that we as judges can establish some schedules that say there are some people we don't want out on the street, and everybody else we want to give the opportunity to, if they're arrested, to post bail and get out. But the Democrats don't like that. The progressives think that in California, everybody ought to get out. So murderers, rapists, domestic abusers, human traffickers, all of those people, for whatever reason, even though they made the choice to do that crime, they ought to be out on the street. Well, again, if we do that, it won't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you're going to have an increase in crime. You're rewarding the crooks who are committing the crimes, that are preying upon you, your kids, your grandkids. Come November, however, we can make a change. So after finding out that 45% of the Democrats in this state think we're going in the wrong direction, I did some surveys. And some other people have done some significant surveys. Now, the chief of the resistance happens to be my opponent, Javier Becerra. And those of you may know that he's now sued the federal government 44 times. You know, every single time Donald Trump sends a tweet out, my opponent thinks that requires a lawsuit. And he's getting close. And some of these lawsuits, which, by the way, cost you $90 million last year, think we could spend our money maybe a little bit more efficiently? And any of you who have been to court know that there's always somebody that's really happy with the decision. So we took a survey in July of Democrats to find out where Democrats were relative to my campaign. At that time, about 30% of the Democrats would entertain the arguments that we were making in this race. 16%, almost sight unseen, would vote for me. If we get 16% of the Democrats in November, we win this election. So, why am I here? Why am I not just going and getting my crown polished up so that I can, because there's a series of surveys that have been recently taken. Many of you may watch One American News. They are maybe the premier news organization that actually goes out to try to find out what voters think, as opposed to telling you what you think. And they did a series of surveys around California, and on the good side, Javier Becerra has negative numbers on the positive, negative name ID that approach 40% in many of the districts. Now you get 40% negative, that says you're likely to lose this race. Most, large parts of the electorate don't like you. So why is that not cause for me to rush off and polish my crown, wait for my coronation? Because nearly a third of the electorate has no idea who Steve Bailey is. And that's a product, one, of money, two, of getting out and talking to your friends and neighbors, as was referred to earlier. It is estimated that every time you go and sit in the pews at church, half the people at church are unregistered. Half of those who are registered don't vote. There are 14 million evangelicals in the state of California. If we voted, there wouldn't be craziness in Sacramento. Not at all. Well, I take that back. There could still be crazy. But we can make a difference in November. And that is where you come in. If you can help financially, I need it. But most important, one, vote. Two, talk to your friends and neighbors. Most people don't spend the time learning about any of the candidates. You can help make a difference there. You need to help make a difference there. Those of you who are interested, I brought a bunch of material. Take all you need, get it out to your friends and neighbors. Talk to your friends at church. Talk to your friends at the Kiwanis Club, at the Rotary Club, at all the other places that you go. Don't be afraid to say, this election in 2018 is the most important election we've had since we elected Donald Trump as President of the United States. And you know what? By the way, Hillary was elected president that night. She's told you that for the last 2 years. And the same thing is happening here in the state of California. Gavin Newsom, the man who's going to bring San Francisco values to the rest of California, has already effectively announced that he is the governor of California. The reason they're having one debate is because he doesn't need to debate. It's all over. It's done with. He's been elected in his own mind. You can make the difference here. Javier Becerra doesn't even want to come out to talk about the failed policies in Sacramento. He's going to hide in his corner office in Sacramento until Election Day, if he can. And quite frankly, based on his negative numbers, I wouldn't want to come out of the corner office either. He brought his political staff from Washington, so they're probably all sitting around talking to themselves about what a great job they're doing, while the citizens of California are saying, we're going in the wrong direction. Counts for his high negatives. Get out and vote. Get out and talk to your friends. Get out and help the candidates. We will win in November 2018. It's less than 30 days from now before the votes are counted. It's our opportunity. It's our year. Just like 2016 was our year, but we didn't know it, 2018 is our year and know it.